I apologize for taking so long to do this bicycle tour wrap-up video. I've been home for a couple weeks and thought I'd just kind of close out this particular bicycle tour. So with that, again, I apologize. So let's kind of get into it. Next thing that I want to go over is the bicycle route that we took. The actual route started near Rochester, New York, where we kind of took the route that you see here. This particular route was a previous ride that I did. That was the Erie Canal Trail. We did jump on the Erie Canal and made our way down to Buffalo, but then we followed along the shoreline of Lake Erie down around the south end of it, back up towards Detroit. In Detroit, we met up with Carl, and then we pedaled across the southern part of Michigan over to South Haven, Michigan, and then we turned north, made our way up to Ludington. There we spent some time with John's cousin, Maggie and Greg. Had a wonderful time with them, and then we had to make a course correction, which basically brought us back across the center part of the state. So we didn't get a ride up here. We still had a good time. Took several days, 20 some days, but we rode all the way over here to Algonac. When we got over in this area right here, my passport had made it, so I had Jackie mail it up to Carl's place. Then Carl's son Adam drove up and met us, and I was able to get my passport, and then we were able to cross into Canada and then follow the north side of Lake Erie through Ontario, Canada. We crossed back into the United States at Niagara. We did spend a little extra time, one day extra there to do the sightseeing. I'd never really got to see it, so we were right there. So John was able to take that extra day, and we did some sightseeing for me. I appreciate that. And then we jumped back on the Erie Canal Trail back to Rochester. So yeah, that was the route that we took, and we'll see what the stats were. So I kind of made my way out here to my garage. The bike, didn't have any problems with the bicycle. The gear that I took, which you would have seen the video, prior to us taking the trip, I did a bike and gear video. Used all the gear except for the solar panel. The solar panel was initially packed because I thought we might be in an area where we didn't have access to power, but given the route that we ended up taking, power was never an issue, so I really didn't need the solar panel, but if I needed it, at least we had it. But yeah, no problems with flat tires. John didn't have any problems. Carl didn't have any problems with any of their gear. So yeah, I packed exactly what I needed to take, and so if you look at that gear video and bike video, that pretty well didn't change. As far as trip statistics, again, John, you probably remember, and Carl, both, you probably remember from the early parts of the cycling across America. When I drove to Rochester, that's the area where John's parents are from, and so we met there. Took a day off before we get there, and then after we got back to Rochester, I spent an extra day in Rochester with John and his parents. So I just want a quick shout out to Jimmy and Marcia. Thanks for having me. It felt like home, like I'd known you guys forever, and and the entire family, you know, his nieces and his sister and his brother-in-law and his cousin Mark. Thank you guys for being such gracious hosts while I was in Rochester. When we got to Detroit, I'd like to thank Carl's dad, Don. He let us stay with him while we were getting ready to go. We also met Elizabeth's parents while we were there in Detroit area. So again, thanks Don for keeping John and I at your place while we were in that area. So we actually left on June 23rd and got back. I'm sorry, we left June 27th and got back on July 23rd. So that was 27 days, and then there were 2 days that we took 0 days, and that was at John's parents and then at Carl's. So the mileage was 1,299.78 miles by my Garmin. Of course, the Garmin, you get into some hills and sometimes it's not super accurate, but so roughly 1,300 miles that we cycled. The time cycling was 112 hours 52 minutes that we were actually cycling, which average speed then was like 11.6 miles an hour, and that was pretty typical of where we were at. When we first started, our average speed was like anywhere from 10.2 to 10.5. I cycle a lot, but the bike still weighs 103 pounds, and when you ride, you can see my bike over there. It's hanging up, the carbon fiber Trek Damani, you know, that's 19 pounds. So it's definitely a different style of riding. And I was sore for a couple days just because of the weight of the bike. I didn't feel like it slowed me down, but it was different. So yes, just because you ride 40 miles a day on a road racing bike doesn't mean that jumping on a fully loaded touring bike is going to be any cake. You know, it's not going to be a real easy transition. So of the days, we spent 11 days camping. There were 9 days in a hotel, and what that boiled down to was Carl, with his job, he earns hotel stays and based on his work. So Carl was gracious enough to use some of those hotel points that he had, which honestly just made our trip that much easier because we were in a little bit more comfort. So thanks, Carl, for supporting John and I on those hotel stays. Really appreciate it. The cost now, of course, riding it, you know, there was several times where it was just John and I, then it was the three of us, and then it was back to John and I. But the cost camping wise was $136. Hotel, we spent $350. Food, $650. Miscellaneous stuff, $20. We did do some sightseeing, like I said, in Niagara, and just souvenirs was $200. And then just the cost to drive back and forth to Rochester was right at $100. So that's what it cost to do this for me. Now, you know, what a person has to realize is, you know, that cost a lot of times was split either by 2 ways or by 3 ways. So that cost will vary depending upon how you're riding. If you're solo unsupported, of course, a hotel, you're gonna pay the full cost, where, you know, when we had to pay for a hotel, it was split 2 or 3 ways. So you can see how that math might vary a bit there on hotel and camping costs. A lot of times the camping, you know, we'd get one spot and then all three of us would split the cost of camping. Talking about camping, New York, the parks in New York, the state parks in New York were really, really nice. The parks in Michigan, the state parks in Michigan were really, really nice. And in Canada, likewise, the provincial parks were very, very nice. We had heard that you needed to do reservations at the Canadian provincial parks, the provincial being their state parks, the equivalent here in the U.S. And a lot of times we would just roll up. They seen that we were on bicycles, and they were extremely accommodating during those summer months while we were up there. John and I we never had a problem in Canada getting, you know, an open spot at a campground. The people in Canada were fantastic. A lot of times when we'd stop in a town, someone inevitably approached us and talked to us. Very, very, very polite people. Sometimes you would get that in the States, more at the campgrounds, but in town, a lot of times people were busy and just didn't talk to us. So, I mean, it's not that big a deal, but I really enjoyed the interaction with the local people. So, yeah, that's kind of a wrap up of the bicycle tour, the 2023 Michigan Mitt bicycle tour, half a Mitt, I guess. But yeah, so if you do have any questions or anything, please feel to comment and I'll answer your questions. With that, that pretty well wraps up this bicycle tour.